the pandemic ended, the war has returned, not quietly but forcefully. From Eastern Europe to the Middle East, we have witnessed the rise of large-scale, big-state conflicts. And each of these wars, from Ukraine to Gaza to Iran, has shattered the conventional wisdom and forced the military planners and governments to rethink the future of warfare. This video is not about headlines, about the deeper lessons, what are modern conflicts teaching us about the limits of military power, the return of attrition warfare, and the critical role of industrial capacity. For 2 decades, much of global military doctrine has been shaped by this war on terror. That era has favored the elite special forces units, surgical strikes, and psychological operations. It was a world of asymmetrical warfare fought in deserts, villages, and mountains against the insurgents and non-state actors. But that model is crumbling right now. Russia's initial success in Crimea and Syria with its infantry tactical groups, the BTGs, created a false sense of confidence. BTGs were mobile, efficient, and suited for short engagements, but short engagements only. That's why in Ukraine that model has collapsed. Without the division-level support, electronic warfare, and robust air defense, Russian units found itself vulnerable and isolated. The entire BTGs were useless after losing single pieces of equipment. Western militaries are also confronting the similar problems. The British Army has reduced to those brigade combat teams. French units deployed to Africa has no experience with cohesive large-scale combats. And the consequences were very real. The Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive was a total failure. It was trained by the Western advisors. One French-trained brigade reported 50% of the desertion rates before it was even deployed. Now, both NATO and Russia are reversing the course, quietly reactivating the Cold War doctrines of mass mobilization. Another myth was also dismantled that modern states can be easily toppled with force. Take Afghanistan as an example. It was only through 20 years of attritional resistance that gradually undermined the Afghan government, which collapsed under the financial, political, and military pressure altogether. Similarly, Syria's Assad also fell in 2024 only after 15 years of a civil war and attritions. But major powers never learned the lesson. Russia believed that it could break Ukraine's government with a lightning assault. Israel assumed that it could dismantle Hezbollah in a matter of weeks. Instead, after 2 years of the conflict, Israel has not only failed, it has arguably strengthened Arab nations' resolve. The Israeli air superiority and targeted assassinations could not substitute for the political and territorial complexity of the region. Israel's current campaign against Iran is now revealing the same issues. That a well-established country with administrative reach, logistical depth, and a coherent ideological base is not easily uprooted by the airstrikes alone. States with robust governance structures can observe the punishment, adapt, and respond. Increasingly, even relatively weaker states that have access to the tools like drones could help leveling the battlefield. The other most overlooked lesson of the modern warfare is that industrial capacity is destiny. Victory in modern conflict is often determined by the industrial strength, not by the heroism in the combat. Why has East Asia avoided war successfully despite hosting some of the world's most volatile flashpoints? It's not because of diplomacy or deterrence, it's because of industrial dominance. Consider the following facts. South Korea produced more artillery shells than 16 NATO countries combined. Japanese shipbuilding capacity outpaces the entire European Union. Even Russia, that once seen as a heavy industrial superpower, now relies on North Korea for the missile supply. Then there's China. It commands a third of the global manufacturing capacity and leads the world in shipbuilding, 200 times more than the Americans. With China's rising capacity in the submarines, hypersonic missiles, and sixth-generation fighter jets, China is posturing itself to become the world's military arsenal, just like the America back in World War II. In 2017, when the US considering striking North Korea, the Chinese opposition stopped it. In the South China Sea today, China's Coast Guard outnumbers the entire Filipino Navy. Meanwhile, the US has struggled to sustain operations against the non-state actors like the Houthis in Yemen, partially due to the unsustainable loss rate of its high-end missile systems. This becomes clear that the modern warfare is not about strategy, it's more about supply chains, about the supply chain ecosystems. So the world conflicts right now since COVID have made one thing clear, that we are transitioning into a new era of warfare, one that looks far more like the 20th century warfare. That small elite forces are no longer a substitute for the national armies, that precision strikes cannot dismantle the resilient state institutions, and that speeches, alliances, or sanctions cannot replace the steel, oil, and warships. If the World War III ever emerge, it will be shaped not by geopolitics or ideology, but by who can build more, faster, and longer. This is a strategic reality which we face today. Thanks for watching and follow for more. Leave your comments below. Peace.